everyone, and welcome to this week's Invisible Not Broken. I have another wonderful guest who is an amazing author of Bare Naked Bravery, Ann Peterson, and she also did the best TEDx talk I've heard in a long time. I watched it 3 times. When you go over to the show notes, everything will be right at the top. So just head over to invisiblenotbroken.com, and her book will be right there, her podcast, which I have a confession I have not listened to yet, but right after I finish this interview, I will be heading over to her podcast. You can listen to her podcast from there. You can buy her book from there. So go on over, and you can also, I think you play your music in your TEDx video in the first few minutes because I love cello music. So Emily, it's so nice to hear from you. Thank you so much for contacting me. I really appreciate that.
Thank you for having me. I was doing some research for a client of mine, a student and a client of mine on, and the internet's an amazing, wonderful place. And I stumbled across.
Now that's optimism.
Yeah. I stumbled across your site and was like, this chick knows what's up. And
knows
totally,
what's up,
I was
or
like,
just can't shut up. It's one or the other.
She and I are going to be good friends.
Well, if you're watching this on YouTube, you can see the Dolly Parton shirt, which I was like immediately loving. And I don't think you can see all of her tattoos, but I am like a seriously inked girl, and everything about your email is like, I can't wait on this. I usually only batch emails once a week, so anyone who emails me is like, why has it? It's once a week I look at my emails, and I think I looked at it on accident. I'm like, oh, I like her. I like her. And also,
good girl for batching your stuff. I mean,
this
honestly.
Is, so we have so much to talk about being sick artists, but that's the only way I can create. I can get into email like rabbit holes, and I only have so many spoons, as in I'm usually borrowing from tomorrow's spoons. So if I email at all, that's the day I'm done. I'm in a rabbit hole for like at least a few hours, and then it's like, but I deserve some Pinterest time now, and then nothing happens. Mm-hmm. So your disorder is actually a friend of mine has it as well, and he is a musician as well. So I was really excited to talk to you. Do you want to explain what your disorder is?
Sure. So I was diagnosed with a degenerative neurological disease called essential tremor, and that diagnosis happened 5 years ago. And I started noticing the tremor about 5.5 years ago.
Oh wow! So you were a cellist at the time.
Yeah, I was a cellist at the time, a full-time musician, and everything in my life, I didn't know it at the time, but everything in my life was dependent upon the stability of my right hand specifically. And that's where my tremor happened.
There. We were both lucky enough to be professional artists and to make our living as artists when it's not just the thing that keeps you sane and your hobby, but the actual way you pay your rent, your mortgage, your life.
And it wasn't just financial, it was also, I looked around me after that diagnosis and realized that every person in my life was in my life because of the instrument. They didn't stick around just because of the instrument, right? But like, that's how we first met, was because I was doing what I do, which is music. And so that was also like another layer of, wow, the whole diagnosis caused a massive deconstruction and dissection of my identity. And that like emotional and relational level was massive, because I didn't realize that my identity was so anchored into this piece of wood with some strings,
Not only do I know, but like when you meet someone and they say something where you're like, me too. Like, yeah. So me too. Like, you feel it in your bones. Like, that was what I called the Great Exodus, was when I became so sick I couldn't work anymore. And the people who were parts of my life, but there were parts of my life because either I met them through photography or, but it was this huge exodus of people who, because I wasn't doing it anymore. It just, that resonates deeply.
Yeah, it sucked. It was really bad. And the diagnosis was what got me into the subject of bravery. My book is called Bare Naked Bravery, How to Be Creatively Courageous. And it's a self-help memoir crossover. Right when I was, after the diagnosis, I was awarded a 6-week artist residency in the mountains of Washington. It was beautiful. terrible also, like really just hard to do. That was the longest time I had spent without touching the cello, because it was so painful for me, emotionally painful for me during those 6 weeks to sit there and go like, great, play the cello now, because it's ruining your life. So
And
I
no
needed
distractions either. I mean, I'm guessing you didn't have like your Wi-Fi and like other ways to like get your head out of this new reality.
I had Wi-Fi in a different building and
Oh.
it was really slow. So, but like my studio space was in a room with no internet and just instruments that I had brought. One of the other instruments that I brought was a keyboard, and I asked the hosting nonprofit organization, arts organization, if it was all right if I didn't play the cello. They had actually selected me for this artist residency to write and record a new album for cello. And I arrived with this diagnosis and was like, so here's the deal. I can do it. Like, I can suck it up and do this thing if you need me to. But I really don't want to. And I really need to not, like, I don't have to do any work. I don't have any students. I don't have any studio sessions scheduled or booked. Is it all right if I spend this 6 weeks just like creatively sulking, so to speak?
Okay, I'm using creatively sulking for the rest of my life. I'm stealing it.
Yeah, it's good. I highly recommend it because it was what I needed to not reconstruct, but find an identity that was already there.
So what does creatively sulking look like for you? I know what creatively sulking looks like for me, and it's massive
Yeah.
Pinterest moments. What does it look like for you?
I think that, my like achievement oriented self would say that it looks like wasting time.
Mm.
My like spiritual self would say that it looks like full alignment on a creative scale, like just doing whatever feels good at that moment. Sometimes for those 6 weeks, it was learning other people's songs on an instrument that I was sort of familiar with, but not familiar enough with. I was also, that was a long time ago. I'm trying to go back through.
I'm good at doing this, getting everyone off track.
No, it's good. Because it's important. So it was I did a lot of cover songs. Like I just learned some cover songs just because that was fun and why not? And then I also was doing some free writes, like just stream of consciousness writing. I attempted to archive all of my journals, and then that gave me too many migraines, and so I decided to burn them, and I did.
That sounds cathartic.
It's great. I would say that's creatively sulking. That was definitely like...
Can we go with creative temper tantrum? Because I feel like that needs a little bit more
Yes.
oomph than sulk.
Yes, exactly. That was a temper tantrum. It was also really healing to... there's a lot to my story, and all that's in my book. And in fact, I did a chunk in my book on why burning those journals was so powerful and created such a good diving board for me to go into my bravery deeper. Because I was free of the censorship and free of the memories and baggage of previous versions of struggle and seasons of bravery. So I was able to just go like, you know what? Let's move on.
Wow. That has like that superhero epic, like big flames in the background as you walk away feeling to it.
Oh, it was great. And then I had a friend who's way into like woo-woo ceremonial kind of stuff. And she was like, you know what you should do with the ashes? This is all via text, right? Because she's back in the Seattle, Tacoma area. And she goes, you should take all the ashes and dump them in the river so that all of the ashes can like go and do what they need to do. And it was fantastic. I loved that. I love that
for two reasons. I mean, there's the beautiful side of it, and then there's someone could read that text without having context to it and really wonder about you. And I love that too.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. So
A
just the
little mischief
ashes.
goes
I
a
mean,
long way.
there you couldn't read them obviously because it's just powdery charcoal ash, right? So putting that in the river was just like metaphorically and symbolically let those words go on and do what they need to do. So that was really, really powerful. So
That
that's
is
some of
beautiful.
the creative sulking that I did out there. But I got done with the 6 weeks and had about a good handful of songs that I had written on keyboard, on piano, like singer-songwriter kind of stuff. And that wasn't surprising to me because I had been in bands before. I had done songwriting before, like as a co-writer, but it was the first time I had done solo songwriting. And I knew enough about music because I had been a musician for forever that I knew that the songs weren't half bad. Like they weren't the best songs in the world, but I also knew like, oh, this is something here. And um, the overarching message from that grieving period was I am not a cellist. I'm an artist, and I'm an
Mm.
artist that has something to say. And if I'm going to say these things, I'm going to have to be brave. And then I came across this hurdle that I was like, are we allowed to cuss on this
Oh,
podcast?
fuck yes.
Okay, great.
We
I was
don't
like,
have to hurt and like go through our entire lives being upended and not get to swear.
I just like to ask because otherwise
Nope, fair.
it has to like censor me out. So, if I'm gonna be a songwriter, I'm gonna have to be brave. And then the massive question was, what the fuck is bravery?
Mm.
Like, how do you be brave? How do you just be brave? You know, and I'm sure that other people who have chronic illnesses, you know, they have family and friends who are like metaphorically patting them on the head or shoulder and going like, you're so brave, be brave, be brave. And you kind of want to just give them a middle finger. Like,
I like you so much.
Right?
It's right up there with inspiring for me. I'm like, if it's something that I didn't have a choice in, I'm not going with inspiring. Please don't set the bar for me that low. Like that hurts when the bar is set that low. Like, yeah. I mean, when you just said like, I am not a cellist, I'm an artist. That hit so hard because I was a dancer and then I couldn't do that, and then I was a jeweler, I couldn't do that, and then I was a photographer and I couldn't do that. And it was like, well, I guess I'm a storyteller because that's all I've done my whole life is find a new way to tell stories. So I'm going to put it under that overarching umbrella that doesn't get defined by my body, and what my body defines what I can and can't do. That yeah, you're hitting me really hard on a lot of this. This is like before my second cup of coffee too, like trying to emotionally and mentally catch up with you.
Well, it's been really fascinating to see since I published my book. It's first of all, it's weird that a songwriter or a musician would write a book and publish it. It's an abnormal thing. That in and of itself is a brave thing in industry wise to like cross genres is one thing, but to cross an entire industry is like, what the hell are you doing? But that has been such a gift for me to see that the artists that are working in multiple mediums are the ones who often are more financially stable, not just because they're diversifying their income, that is part of it, but also because they're able to see that it's not about the CD. It's not about the album. It's not about the earring that's hanging from their customer's ear. It's about the other thing. And that other thing is when you acknowledge what that other thing is, it makes it really easy to make more decisions as an artist, for instance. So like I've realized that my thing is bravery. Now I can talk about bravery in a house concert. I can play songs that feature bravery, stories of bravery. I can on social media talk about other people's bravery and my own bravery and fear of bravery and all the ingredients of bravery. And those are things that basically that's the paint that I can paint with as an artist, metaphorically. Ooh, this is getting real meta.
That is beautiful. Now I am all about this. But it's
So,
cyber
but it
stalking.
makes it easier when you have a chronic illness and like every fucking thing is getting taken away from you.
Ah, yes.
But you still have stories and you still have connection and you still have your true self and how that gets connected or delivered or served to other people. As a business owner, the methods and the modes and the mediums can all change, but you can still do what you do ultimately.
So I was completely cyber stalking you this morning. After I finished
Hmm.
following you on all your social media accounts, I went and watched your interview. And you said something that was just so beautiful about bravery and vulnerability. And how that's the cover. I mean, first off, you're epically stunning, and your cover is yourself, and it's a beautiful cover. And what you were saying about the beauty of vulnerability and bravery, I'm going to paraphrase it wrong, so I will let you talk about it because it hit me so hard.
It's so fascinating. When we picked the cover of the book, there were two options. One had a bluish, purplish background and actually had more nudity of me. The backside of me diving backwards, basically. And then this other one had me with my hands crossed in front. And you just see like cleavage and shoulders and the lower half of my face. It was split down the middle between my fans. Like half of them really loved like the full nudity, because that's like exhibits the vulnerability required to be, do something that scares you. But I ultimately picked, because it was split, I was like, oh, well, I'll be the tiebreaker, because I know that true bravery is when you are able to be vulnerable, but in control of who is seeing or how vulnerable you are being. And
Wow.
right? So because otherwise, if you're just like, if you have no choice about how much, let's say, nudity, how much you're exposing yourself to the world, that's called rape or assault, right?
Oh God, how many times can we go through this definition? I mean, like,
right?
When you're seeing like these women apologizing for taking photos that get like forced out into the public, and you're like, don't fucking apologize for that. You have nothing to apologize for. The person who did that has the apology to be making, if there ever could be enough of an apology. Like, sorry, we're if anyone's listening to this, we're probably like 3 months ahead of this, but the Kavanaugh hearings just happened, and I've been rocking back and forth in a fetal position for like 72 hours. So consent has become a huge part of the discussion in my world, my family, with my preteen and my teenager. I've been talking about was nothing else except consent. And yeah, well, sorry.
And this brings up a good topic, because I talk about this in my book. Like, what's the difference between victimhood and vulnerability? And the difference is that with vulnerability, you are the one tearing down the wall of boundary that you've set between yourself and the person that you're being vulnerable with. If someone else tears down that wall, you are a victim.
I feel like almost everything you're saying needs to be put on tattoos. Like, yeah. Yes. I've never heard it explained that well before, because like people are talking about Christina Ford, and like, you're right, she would be a victim because she came forward silently and that was forced open, which is, you're really amazing at breaking things down. I'm so impressed.
That's my secret sauce as a songwriter. Like, that's the skill, like, as a songwriter. And then as songwriters, we have to take really complicated subject matter and boil it down to 3 to 5 minutes.
Well, I mean, you bring up like some of like what got me through high school, which was Me and a Gun, Tori Amos, and almost every Annie Franco spoken word was like
totally
what made me survive. And that was where I decided that you don't get to hide anything, because these two women kept me alive because they were so raw bone honest. And trigger warning for anyone, Me and a Gun only to be listened to around support networks. Like, make sure you have support. But I just have such an affinity for songwriters, because that's a level of vulnerability that even I write fiction. I don't have that vulnerability because I can hide behind a character. when you're doing your
I
songwriting.
disagree with you,
Oh,
but
okay, it's fine.
I'll let it pass.
No, feel free. I have a teenager. I haven't been right in 17 years. Go for it.
No, I think that you can still be very, very, very vulnerable without, as an author, as a writer, without you being the subject at hand. And that happens with me in the songs that I write too. Like I sometimes have to step aside, like my personhood steps aside when I'm writing a song that involves a character. Like say for instance, the song I just wrote about these Senate judicial hearings, I had to set, I am not the subject of the song, even though the pronouns I'm using is you, me, them, and me being Christine Blasey Ford or someone who's experienced sexual assault. So it is still my job as a writer to display the vulnerability and connect with the listener and tell a story with a listener in the same powerful kind of way that it would be but if it was just me and you, Emily, Ann, and so I think that as a fiction writer, you can still do the same thing.
So I've gotten impressively off track because Kira's probably gonna be laughing in the background. I am so bad at doing a follow through, and when I was so excited to talk to you, there was like all these things. I'm like, I have to ask her this, and this, and this. I want to go back a little bit as we're talking about bravery and vulnerability, and get to the 6 months before your diagnosis.
Yeah.
I didn't even have you explain what you have.
So it's a tremor in my right hand. So when my hand is not resting on something, and it's basically being held out in the open, it shakes. And it looks like I've had too much caffeine, which I have had today. I've had too much caffeine. But one of the lifestyle changes, I would say one of the lifestyle changes that I've had to make is if I'm in a performance season, I eliminate caffeine. Because the caffeine is significantly not a good thing for me to be having. It does not help the tremor at all. So
was that a quick thing where it just suddenly started happening, or was it a slow onset? When did you first notice?
It was slow. I started noticing it during things like if I hold a fork or a pen, because it's light enough that my stabilizing muscles aren't engaged. And so the pen will shake just because it's just so light that my stabilizers aren't engaged in that action. So something like holding a pen or a fork was when I started noticing that my hand was shaking. And I automatically assumed like, oh, it's too much caffeine, or you just need to calm down, Emily, or why are you so nervous? Like those were the things going through my head. I started noticing people noticing it. Like I wasn't talking about it at all, but I would be talking with a friend over dinner or something, and I would be telling them a story, talking with my hands, with my fork in my hand or something like that. And I would see their eyes dart over to my fork, and I'd look down and my hand was shaking, and I wouldn't acknowledge it or talk about it at all, because I was just that brief instant of like, wow, they noticed, interesting. Then there was one day I was dating this guy who was really acutely aware of details, and it was wonderful and very sweet, especially when he acknowledged that he noticed things. However, this moment was a little bit aggravating because I said, oh my gosh, this is so strange. My hand is shaking. That's so weird. And he goes, yeah, it's been shaking for the last 2 months.
Oh.
And I was so pissed that he didn't tell me that he knew that he noticed. But I think he could put two and two together, that this was a big, that wasn't something that was a good subject to just kind of go, hey, how's my hand shaking? So
Emily Post has never written a book on this, by the way. No one knows the proper etiquette for, I think there's something in your life that's going to blow up really soon. Let's work on this.
I know. So there was a day that I was, it was getting progressively worse, just a little bit over the course of, I would say, like 4 or 5 months or so. Um, I one day was getting ready to have a day of cello lessons and was warming up in my teaching studio, playing the cello, and I heard the tremor. And I'm a professional cellist, so I know enough about the mechanisms of body movement and the efficiency of movement and all of the things, the inner workings of technique and how to use the bow. I've been doing it for a long time. So I knew that if I could not control my hand at this point in my career, that it was screwed, totally screwed. So that was the day I called my general practitioner. And because it looks a little bit like Parkinson's, my GP was really concerned about it because, she's not a neurologist. So she practically held my hand going up to the neurologist's office, who diagnosed me almost instantly because he was like, you don't have Parkinson's. There are other symptoms that you don't have if you were to have Parkinson's.
That is the ultimate good news, bad news moment. Like,
right?
So
congratulations, you don't have Parkinson's,
but your life,
yeah.
Oh, wow. Yeah. I hear that so well.
Yeah. So the doctor was really sweet. He, there was over a course of the several appointments that we had, there was one moment where he's writing the second prescription for a different medication because the first ones didn't work like we wanted them to. And I remember looking down at the floor and just kind of going, so this isn't going to go away, is it? And he put his pen down and looked up at me and just said, no, it's not going to go away. And then later on in a different conversation that he and I had, he was like, we have to get you playing music. Like, you are the neurology patient that I wake up in the morning for because we need more music in the world. We need to get you back to playing music. Like, this needs to happen. So an essential tremor is one of the most common neurological diseases, but it has, there's a lot of people who have it. It's typically diagnosed when you're 40 or older because it is degenerative. So oftentimes you'll notice it when you're nervous in your 20s and about ready to give a performance or a speech or presentation at work or something. And then later on in life, then your hands start shaking or your neck starts shaking or your voice kind of quivers. So a lot of times when people are diagnosed with it, they're retired already. They don't have an income that depends on this. And so because of that factor, there's not a lot of research money that goes into finding a cure for this because it's just not, it doesn't have a high pain point, like migraines, say, for instance, are completely and totally debilitating in the very moment. But so what? Your hand shakes. That's like not as big of a thing when you're first diagnosed. So it is hereditary. So I have my dad's hand shakes, and then also on my mom's side, my grandmother's head shakes, and my great grandfather's hand shook when he was alive. So it's on both sides of my family, which is great genetic lottery. And like the stars just aligned so beautifully. And it's true. Like, I say that facetiously, but I also, on this side of that season of bravery, I know that it has only been good things for me. Only been good things.
You're obviously very ahead of the curve if you're starting these things at 20-something. That's you're really good at breaking things down. What do you think people should do when they first get diagnosed with something that's life-changing? I mean,
take a deep breath. Take 6 of them. Actually, there's a study there's a Japanese study that proves that taking 6 large, deep breaths in a row drastically lowers your blood pressure. And when you can lower your blood pressure, you're physically putting your brain chemistry in a better place to make better decisions. So when you're freaking out and like running around like a hamster on a wheel, that's not helping you make good decisions. So if you have just gotten really tragic news, the best thing to do is literally take 6 deep breaths.
That's a good first start. And what about for the months afterwards where you're deciding who you're going to be and what you're going to do?
One step at a time. And then also, nothing is permanent. So when it comes to like, like in the months after my diagnosis, I had various part-time day jobs that were not fun, but they gave me the space to mentally and emotionally do more of that grieving process, to pick the next thing. Yeah, it sucks. It's going to be hard. It's not like I don't have any easy answers. But I think that was one of the main reasons why I wrote the book, because there were no easy answers out there. And there's a ton of books on fear, and there's a ton of books on anxiety, and Brene Brown is doing like world altering research in the realms of wholeheartedness and courage and all of that. But those are all theories. And I hadn't read a book that was like, no, here are the ingredients. Like, if you're missing one of these, you're making your life hard. And so that's what the book is about. I wanted to make sure that there was a book available for somebody else who was going through something like what I was going through. Yeah.
Yeah, I think at least for me, the bravest thing I ever did was grieve. That was the hardest thing for me to do, because I am the person who cannot go in the in-between space. I refuse to go to the in-between space. I always run to the next thing. The second one thing isn't working, I want to burn it and then scatter the ashes in a river before I can even look at it, and then move to the next thing. So when I got this sick and I had to give up my business, that was the bravest thing I did, was to actually allow some time to just be still and say goodbye to that person I was. And that was hard because I was also saying goodbye to most of my social structure, my income, and then I tried to figure out what to do next, and that was the hard thing. I'm just wondering how did that work for you? Because you also had a huge social. Well, that's all, folks. This is what happens when you mix painkillers with caffeine. It's fun. Yes, thank you, Jeff Sessions. We had a big social structure shift, and I'm guessing income shift, and then you went off to a retreat.
Mm-hmm.
That's a lot of change in the middle. I mean, I'm so glad you had that quiet, forced time, but
totally.
Yeah. That sounds
and
like
the grieving
lot.
process was not over after those six weeks. I just want to be very clear that it took a very long time. And I started my podcast and I started the research for my book during the grieving process, during like the tail end of the grieving process, really. Because I didn't know what bravery was. So I just started with the people around me who I knew were brave. And I just started asking them questions like, why do I think that you're brave? And why is it that this story that you have in your history is like the coolest, most heroic thing I've ever heard? And how come you're not famous, like for doing this thing? And, and everybody's responses were the same. Like, and I started noticing over the course of all of these interviews, which some of them are podcast episodes, some of them were private. I started noticing over the course of these interviews that similar themes kept popping up, like vulnerability, like improvisation, like imagination, which are the 3 big ingredients of bravery. Also things like, I'm not brave, or doing that thing did not feel brave, or right. So if you just got diagnosed, your life is like blowing up around you, the last thing it feels like is brave. It feels like fear. Like bravery oftentimes feels like fear. And I think that when you are able to creatively utilize your fear, that is when you're being courageous or brave, because bravery and courage are the same thing.
Well, it's such a
Um,
toxic idea that bravery is the absence of fear, wherein I feel like it's almost this embracing of fear and going, okay, I'm terrified and everything is going wrong, but I'm going to choose to still breathe and I'm going to still choose to create or to do something in the middle of it. And like Neil Gaiman, one of my favorite humans on the face of the earth, and his wife, Amanda fucking Palmer. I mean, come on. How do you not love her?
she's
But
great.
what he wrote about that, whatever has just gone horribly wrong, make art out of it. Because you don't
Yeah,
have a choice of what's happening to you. The only choice you have is how you respond. Yeah, can you tell him, mom, this is like what I have to say like every like 20 minutes. You can't control what happens. You can only control your response.
exactly. Exactly. And that's, um, you know, that when I was, so there's one podcast interview that is really gonna like make you cry. If you are in the mood for a good tissue session, then this is a good one. So Holli Margel is a photographer in the Seattle area. And if you just go to my website, at the very bottom of my site, emilyannpeterson.com, there's a search bar. And if you just type Holli, Holli,
I'll link it in the show
um,
notes.
then that'll show up. She is a photographer from the Seattle area. Awesome photographer. And she also lost her mom to breast cancer. And we got to this moment in the interview. It was pretty fresh. I didn't know at the time that how fresh her mom's passing was. But we got to this point in the interview where she was telling us like the moment that her mom passed away in the hospital, and all the family like looked at each other, and then they had to leave the hospital room. And they had been preparing for this moment. It was like sudden, you know, like it happened fast, you know, like over the course of a couple months. But this moment that they had all been waiting for happened. And then what? And that's exactly what I was like, then what did you do? And she goes, and her response was like, we did the next thing. And sometimes that's all you can do when your life is really just really fucked up, and all you can do is just the next thing.
I'm a Doctor Who geek to the nth level, and one of my favorite episodes was when the Doctor is just sitting there after Clara's gone, and he's talking about how like that day is the easiest. It's the day after that's the hard. It's like there's something to do when it's the easy part. It's those quiet moments in between, and I firmly believe that grief is its own chronic invisible illness because it's not something that goes away, and it takes such a huge part of your soul and your mental capacity of what's going on, and like the background noise is just this like empty void, and that's something that so many people carry around every single day. And it's not something, it's something that like someone described it as a tsunami, and the wave comes in really hard and you're just trying to not drown and just trying to come up and trying to come up, and these giant waves keep coming the second you catch your breath, and that over time those waves space out but they never go away. And that was like the realest thing I ever heard about grieving, was that it's not something that stops, and it's not something that doesn't hit you just as hard. It's just the space in between sometimes gets further out.
I've also heard the metaphor that bravery, just habit, grief, or losing someone or something in your life leaves a hole in your life, and then life just grows around that hole.
Oh, that's beautiful. I mean, if you think about who you were, and I can say this because, like, at least I think I can, because of I was an artist. I was a photographer. That was everything that I was. So I wasn't just saying goodbye to my business. I was saying goodbye to this huge aspect of who and what I was, and how I, you know, almost my entire day and my identity of what I was. I was a female business owner. I was doing all these things, and I was also a storyteller for people's families and for women's bodies and who they were. And saying goodbye to that person was hard. And then saying goodbye to not necessarily the people. There's still people who are here, but that part of our relationship was different now. That I wasn't that person that I was, even in my marriage, that there was this change in who I was going to be. And that was hard for us to readjust. Did you have people in your life that that you had to like rearrange how and who you were with, or were you just better at breaking things down than I am? Because that's entirely possible.
No, there was definitely like there are friends who I love and adore. I would call them colleagues, but I think they're friends, you know. But it was clear that after the cello was gone, that they were colleagues more than they were friends. Do you know what I mean?
Oh, I 90% of my social life, yes, back then
right?
was people that I thought were like very, very emotionally close. We shared everything, but it was also because we had business interests at heart, and that once those business interests were gone, it just didn't line up.
Right.
Yeah.
It's very similar to, I mean, the opposite of this is like when your friend has a baby and you don't have a baby, then like suddenly you're not gabbing with each other at the coffee shop or over happy hour. You're at the playground and getting interrupted. And that's a very different kind of relationship. Not bad. Like I still have friends. I'm not.
Some of my best friends have babies. Yes, I got it.
Yeah, but some of my best friends still have babies, but it's a fact that our relationship changed after the baby arrived.
Yeah, I can speak on it from the other side. I had a son very young, and none of my friends are just having babies now, like right now. And my son is ready to actually move up next to you. We're flying up next to you in a few weeks just because he wants to move up there. So I have this kid who's getting ready to leave the house, and all my friends are having their first. And it was really hard it wasn't as violent of a shift, but it was definitely a huge shift on how people saw who I was, what I want to do, what my interests would be. Whether I had brain power or not was a very big question for the first 5 years after he was born. Right. Seriously, the mommy brain thing is real. Like, I got it back just now, and my youngest is a preteen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a thing. It's a thing. Well, I just moved to Nashville, so I don't know what
Oh, no, I thought you were up in Seattle.
Yeah, I just moved to Nashville just now. I got done with the book promo tour and concerts from this last tour season and was like, you know what? It's cheaper in Nashville.
Oh my God. I just watched
Let's live there.
Best like interview with like these it was the rulers of the realm. I am a total nerd, I swear. And it was like all these fantasy writers, and they asked these very famous fantasy writers, what's your best advice for a new fantasy writer? And they're like, move out of Seattle, San Francisco, San Diego, and New York. Move to the middle of the country where you won't have to worry about like paying rent. That's real.
It's a really good advice. Really good advice. Because otherwise you end up investing all of your energy, which if you have a chronic illness, you have a limited amount of energy.
What energy? So what is that again?
If you are investing all of your energy in staying in a location, then you're not spending that energy in creating more things.
That is a beautiful point. And I will remind all of our international audience, South Korea, thank you, by the way, for listening. I'm really amazed. It's expensive to be sick here. I don't know what your physical therapy is like for your tremor, or what you have to pay to keep things going, but mine can top over $1,000 very easily a month, even with insurance. So when you can move somewhere that's less stressful, that definitely helps with the bills.
Yeah. I mean, the finances are a totally different subject, but I was just talking about like energy wise, like in order to stay in the city, you have to pay rent. And so you have to, or mortgage or whatever. So you have to have a job to support that thing, or your job or your creativity has to create enough financial stability that you can stay in that one location. Which then ultimately comes down to like, you have limited amount of energy.
Yes. And we don't have and it's important for our international audience to realize this, we don't have any safety nets the way that other countries do. So if you don't work for a corporation, you don't have health insurance unless you pay for it privately, which easily gets to $1,000 a month to pay privately for it. So if you want to be an artist full-time, that is an incredibly dangerous proposition to have, because you are paying for your own health insurance. Just a little sideline on why things in the U.S. are a little bit more, well, I'm sure anyone who's listening to this has heard our news stories and knows how stressed all of us are right now, but I just always feel like it's important to put that underline into this. You also put onto your profile, I didn't realize this, that you had hypothyroidism.
Yeah.
So that's another like 20 spoons taken away from you daily.
I'm scooting my chair closer to the desk.
Yes,
I'm in it now. Um, I published my book in January of this year. Around that time, I was diagnosed with hypothyroidism. For the last 10 plus years, I have had like kind of on the low side of energy. This is also a hereditary thing on my dad's side. I have a lot of family members that are on levothyroxine, and I had gotten my blood tested before like 10 years ago, and the doctor was like, "Oh, it's a little low, but it's not low enough to put you on any medicine." So I fucking suffered for 10 years because this one lady said that it wasn't bad enough for me to take any action on it, which she had a point. Like, she has a point. Um, at the time, I also was depressed, and so we weren't sure if, like, okay, well, maybe it's the depression that's like, whatever. Zoom forward, and I'm in the middle of my book launch. I self-published the book, and it was a bestseller in the first week. So awesome. It was very awesome success. However, I was taking like necessary naps multiple times a day and was feeling really shitty about myself because of the nap situation, needing to take the nap all the time. There was also some other really bizarre symptoms, hormonal related, and I finally was like, there was like a emotional roller coaster day, and ended up just crying in the shower like, I don't want to feel like this. This is not how somebody should feel. I shouldn't want to like kick my dog and then punch a pillow and then cry about it immediately, like in like the span of 10 seconds. I didn't kick my dog, by the way, but I
PETA,
really
do
wanted
not call
to.
us.
I really wanted to, but I knew that I didn't actually want to do it, but I had this like rage that I couldn't control. And then just fear about like, who am I? Who is this person? Went to doctor. He did the blood test, hypothyroid. It was a little bit worse than before, but the doctor fortunately was like, well, since you have 6 family members who are on levothyroxine and it works for them, why don't we just put you on it and see what happens? And it's great. I don't need naps anymore. Like, it was as simple as that.
Wow. How often do any of us with chronic illness get to take a pill and it actually gets like significantly better? Like, that's so rare in our world. Like,
but I will say this, that like, it has been a blessing because, one, I get to take naps now and know that it's actually helping me completely, I know that I need it. When I need a nap, I actually do need a nap. I'm not being lazy.
That's such an American thing, isn't it? Like, something that's self-care, we need to justify with a like doctor's note or something. Like,
I know.
Is that just American, or is that just American female? Because like there's just something about like every woman I know, and even a lot of men too. I mean, I feel like it's just how we're almost raised here in this country, that like this work until you fall over dead is almost like this sort of badge of honor.
Oh, it's not one I'm proud of, but
Yeah.
I have that badge. So that
was given out in the Scouts, I'm sure.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm. Girl Scouts when I was 6, I got one. I think that one of the things that has really been great about having chronic illnesses, in plural,
mm-hmm. We never get just one. We get to collect them all,
like pogs. When I now am like a supreme automator. Everything in my life is either batched, automated, systematized, or really organized. Out of necessity, but it also gives me, the benefit of that is it gives me space in my day to write a song when I want to take a nap if I want to clean the bathroom if I am suddenly feeling like it, so that automation is not just like pick a software or hire a robot, to do it. Automation is like getting in the habit of doing something. When somebody says, hey, can you remind me to do da-da-da? I immediately grab my phone and go, hey, Siri, remind me on Tuesday to da-da-da-da. And that's going to.
Yeah, thank you, Siri. And what's the Google one? Yeah, my son has the Google one. It's the
Yeah.
best thing ever. Do you have any favorite like batch tips, or are those in your book?
Those are not in my book. That would be a fun book to write, wouldn't it? I think I've got a lot of things to say
I
about
mean,
that.
if you want to come back on the podcast or do a monthly How to Batch Your Life as a Chronic Illness blog post, I would not say no to not having to write that blog post that week. I would be very grateful if you wanted
Duly
to do
noted.
like a column for the podcast or the blog. That would be fantastic.
We're gonna talk.
Excellent. Good, because I want more excuses
there's
to
a
talk
lot
to
of
you.
things. I use Zapier a lot, which is basically a software that uses API keys and connects other softwares to each other. So I can basically say, when this software does this one thing, I want you to do all these other things to these other softwares. So with my podcast, basically I have like, okay, when somebody schedules an appointment with me here, create 3 Google Calendar appointments, send an email to this person, do this, and add a Trello card, put the Trello card in this list in this folder, and then add all these files to that Trello card. So it does all like the back work for me, so that I know that like at the time of the appointment, I just have to open up a file and everything that I need is right there.
So I'm taking notes because everyone who's like emailed me for appointments for the podcast knows I am horrible at this. And hopefully I'll get more organized now.
One of the things that I've done, one of the ways that I've diversified my artistry is I've founded a School of Bravery. So what I do is there's 2 master classes a month and then weekly office hours with me, unlimited amount of office hours on, I just check in on everything on Wednesdays via Voxer. So it's super accessible and like low time consumption. But one of the classes that I'm going to teach in the future is like, let's hack your life with Trello, because it's one of the best things for content creation that I use. It's one of the best tools.
I've never heard of it. I will be Googling it directly after this.
Mm-hmm.
So my favorite
the trick is not just Trello by itself. You have to like plug it into all these other things.
I won't even look it up till you do the class. I will just waste my time running in circles, chasing my tail. My favorite is what is this app? It's like my new favorite thing ever. It's called Fabulous, and it like you actually get to like create these morning routines, and it does it in this like beautiful way. And I am a sucker for UI. If it's not beautiful, I will never use it. And this is like they hired illustrators to do these beautiful illustrations. So it's my new obsession.
Okay, I just wrote that down.
It is the only way I get my physical therapy done every morning. So it's my new obsession. So we are actually coming up on almost an hour, and I have one last question I just like had on my I have to ask you list, and I'm so sad to like stop the interview ever, but you had talked a little bit about weight and how you got treated by doctors, and I know Kyrus has talked about this in the past, and a lot of the people we've interviewed have talked about how doctors either minimize your symptoms until you lose weight or just use like the weight is the big issue here and we'll talk about everything else afterwards. Do you have this problem? Is this something that you've experienced? Yes.
Well, I mean, so first of all, I have a history of an eating disorder.
See, look how much we have in common.
Yeah, woohoo.
Yeah, you and me and like 90% of everyone else.
Welcome to the club. No, it's because I have a history with eating disorder. The standard go-to methods for losing weight are not on the table for me because those are mental health issues. Like exercising is a mental health issue for me. I was just at brunch with a bunch of runners, and I think running is great. I really want to be a runner, but I also know that my mental health, running is not a totally great thing for my mental health. If I go into it, I go way into it, and it's a little too intense.
See, I have if I am running, you need to start also, because the only way I'm running is if something went really bad behind me. That sounds like the worst idea ever. It's like, go and enjoy nature blurring past you. No, none of this is fun. None of it sounds good
Well,
to
I
me.
mean, there are moments where I have enjoyed the feeling of my body moving, but more often than not, like a hill will have come up in the run, and then the my it triggers the same kind of loop pattern that I would go on when I was in an eating disorder, which
Mm,
is, why are you so bad at this? You know, the whole tapes that get pulled through. Like, you need to be doing this. This is the reason why you can't run up this hill, is because all of these other
mm.
things, right?
You will never speak to anyone else as meanly as you can talk to yourself. Like, there's
Oh,
no
totally.
one in the world. Like, I couldn't even talk to Jeff Sessions as meanly as I talk to myself. I probably could, but it would be a stretch. Like,
So with as far as like weight and doctors go, I've had a lot of experience with talking about my weight with doctors. Um,
and how does that go? Because I have just started dealing with that because of all the drugs I'm on have caused a massive amount of weight gain. But I'm only allowed to eat
well,
1,200 calories a day to maintain what, and it's like going right back into my old anorexia patterns. So
so
talking to them is weird.
when I'm with my doctor, when I have been with a doctor and they start to mention weight or they talk about weight, well, first of all, I request to not see the scale when every time I
Ah,
go in. So I get on the scale backwards, and usually, like, the nurse is like making lumps. She was weird about weight, like they're not writing that in my thing, but they notice, like, oh, this chick is not getting on the scale like everybody else does.
she's not playing
Um,
nice.
she's she's doing this different. And I get in the room. It depends on what I'm in the doctor's office to talk about, but like, if weight does come up, my first card is, well, I had an eating disorder when I was in high school. And usually their eyes get big and they're like, oh, okay, cool. Well, there was a couple times before I was diagnosed with hypothyroidism where like my blood pressure was a little bit high, and the weight conversation happened, which was like, we want you to lose this healthily, but like, I think that like this blood pressure thing is coming from the weight situation. And we can't know what exactly was going on, because blood pressure is a day-to-day kind of thing for the most part. um
Just being in a
but
doctor's office raises it already. Like, you're not in a comfortable, relaxed place. You're already scared. Like,
right. So but now that I have hypothyroidism, that's a really nice explanation. I
hmm.
don't know if it's a full and complete explanation for my weight, the status of my weight, but I know that that's a thing that goes through doctors' heads when I have an appointment with them.
I love that you talked about taking back control of the appointment by deciding how much information you are willing to take in, and just I like the idea of taking control of the appointment. That's something that I will be using from here on out, because like the first words are always, well, if you lost weight, you wouldn't dislocate as much. If you lost weight, you'd be able to exercise more. I'm like, we're just ignoring this entire genetic structure of my DNA that makes me dislocate all the time, which might make exercise a little hard. Like, it just
Well,
feels like it's saying that
from
they use like
having
depression. Like, it's obviously your depression. You're obviously hysterical. You're obviously this. Like, this is the fibromyalgia diagnosis. Not that I have fibromyalgia. There's a real diagnosis, but I feel like that's a lot of like what everyone gets shoved into when they don't know what else to say.
well, weight gain is not the disease. It's the symptom of
Mm.
something else. And, like, in various points in my life, the weight gain was a symptom of recovering from an eating disorder. My body didn't have the metabolism to keep up with the nutrition that I was giving it. Or the metabolism was completely busted from the get go, or there's so many reasons that it's not worth going back to try to figure it out, but it is worth it to just go, weight is a symptom. It's telling me something. The way that my body feels is a symptom of what's actually happening and what's actually going on. So, um, unfortunately, there was a really amazing article on, was it the Huffington Post, about everything. I think the title of the article was "Everything You Know About Obesity is Wrong" or something like that. Really amazing article about healthcare system in the US, specifically in the US, is it's just people are saying that obesity is an epidemic, but actually the way we handle obesity is the epidemic.
That's a very important point, especially when it's $6 billion. How many billions of dollars is it? It's $1 billion industry, multi-billion-dollar industry for people to lose weight. So when people are making that much money on a problem, I don't think there's a lot of honesty that goes with it with doctors, especially when they don't know. Like every doctor I know has said, like, I know more about obscure diseases than I know how people actually lose weight.
Mm-hmm.
Which is a weird thing even for nutritionists to say. I'm like, there's no science? Like, didn't you? Okay. Frustration. We are actually at an hour, which breaks my heart because I'm enjoying talking to you so much. I would talk to you all day. Please come back on the show, and I would appreciate that, and definitely write those blog posts. And your book is?
Bare Naked Bravery. And if you go to emilyannpeterson.com, it's available there. Or you can go on Amazon, and it's available in Kindle, paperback, hardback, and audiobook. And I'm reading the audiobook. So
oh my God, that's awesome.
Yeah. So you can just lay in bed and I'll just read you stories.
Yeah, especially like if you're like me and you can't hold the big books. That's very, and I love your voice. If you go to Invincible Not Broken, all of this is at the very top of the show notes. So you can buy the book, you can go to her website, you can sign up for the School of Bravery, which sounds pretty amazing. I'll be waiting on pins and needles for the Trello sort of how to get my life in order would be lovely. So come back to us next week. I'm going way far ahead on episodes, so it'll be a surprise. I don't know what next week will be, but tune in next week anyway. If you want to support us, Invisible Not Broken on Patreon, please do that. Being sick in the United States is expensive. And until next week, be kind, be gentle, and be a badass.
Yeah!